When multinational companies operate worldwide, they can cause or contribute to serious human rights or environmental abuses throughout their value chains. Access to justice and compensation for the foreign victims of these abuses is a struggle. This is why litigation is a core element of Sherpa's work, along with its various civil society partners. And I know it's also the case for law firms such as yours.
Yeah.
So how would you define strategic litigation?
Strategic litigation has two elements. One is that you are trying to obtain redress for victims of human rights abuses, but we're also trying to change the law with respect to the accountability of multinational companies.
What would you say are the main obstacles to access justice today?
Fundamentally, the biggest difficulty, I think, for bringing cases against multinationals is trying to unpick their very complex corporate structure. So that requires very forensic, detailed work to try and understand how the corporation functions and influences its subsidiaries.
And it makes it difficult to access the information, but also it's difficult to attribute a wrongful act.
Let me illustrate with an example. We brought a case against Unilever in Kenya for failure to protect their Kenyan tea workers during the 2007 election violence. And we said that this was a failure of the subsidiary, but it was also a failure of the parent company. But there were all kinds of documents that we needed to see to understand properly how the parent company related to the subsidiary on the issue of security and risk management. And they simply refused to give it to us. And ultimately the Court of Appeal accepted that there was no case that could be brought against them. So we didn't get to disclosure.
Yes, that reminds me of the Perenco case. Perenco has been accused of contributing to or causing environmental damage as a result of their oil activities. We filed a pre-trial action so we could get access to evidence in view of an upcoming litigation on the merits about pollution in DRC. The thing that happened is that we were granted the request for the authorization to have the company let us access the documents, but the company refused to perform the decision of the judge.
Now, it should not be that difficult. It should be a much simpler process. There should be a presumption that the parent company has responsibility.
C'est vrai que le sens de l'histoire actuellement va plus vers permettre l'opacité et reconnaître le secret. Donc on a aujourd'hui une directive européenne qui a été transposée en droit français qui permet de protéger à peu près n'importe quel secret de l'entreprise à partir du moment où elle a une ampleur économique. Donc c'est dire qu'en fait on peut tout protéger.
And also we have to bear in mind and be realistic that the case we deal with are very political and that oftentimes there is no political will to take action against corporations.
Notamment, il y a eu la loi Sapin 2 qui a créé la convention judiciaire d'intérêt public, donc qui permet de trouver un accord sur le paiement d'une amende. Finalement, en faisant cette convention, on échappe à un procès.
On avait à l'époque alerté sur les risques et les dangers de prendre la direction de la justice négociée, qui maintiennent finalement ces affaires de corruption dans un cénacle politico-financier sans aucune transparence.
Under French law, not all NGOs are able to bring all claims. There are some rules that are called admissibility rules, and those rules are becoming more and more restrictive, especially in criminal proceedings. And in some criminal proceedings, you need to have an approval by the government to act.
Il y a le problème de l'agrément, évidemment, puisque les associations anticorruption aujourd'hui doivent être agréées. C'est une difficulté, c'est un obstacle, puisqu'il faut obtenir cet agrément d'un ministère qui fait partie d'un gouvernement.
Dans le schéma actuel de délivrance de l'agrément, par une entité qui émane du gouvernement, on peut avoir des blocages.
Notamment, il y a très peu de temps, pour vous comme pour nous, il y a eu un très gros problème dans le renouvellement de cet agrément. Et donc, ça a été l'occasion de se mobiliser ensemble sur une campagne sur quelles doivent être les conditions pour autoriser une association à agir en justice contre des élus ou des entreprises, des élus corrompus ou des entreprises corruptrices.
Organizations like Sherpa and Lead Aid play an absolutely crucial role We are the only real actors in this space who are seeking to hold companies to account. No one else is doing it. You're obviously an NGO that has a huge amount of respect within the French system and internationally.
At Sherpa, we appreciate very much being able to work hands in hands with committed partners such as LIDE, and it's very important that we share lessons, resources, and everything we've learned with one another.